In the far reaches of the north, where icy winds slice through the air and the earth lies frozen for months, life was never about comfort. It was about holding on. In the medieval landscapes of Scandinavia, one grain came to define this struggle, not through prestige, but through sheer resilience. Rye. It was not the grain of feasts or courts, nor the symbol of wealth and refinement. It was the grain that kept hunger at bay when nothing else could. Villagers leaned on it, not out of admiration, but because it refused to surrender to the cold. The story of rye is the story of survival itself, why it endured when every other crop faltered, and how it became the uncelebrated lifeline of the north. The environment gave no mercy. Summers were brief, with the sun dipping before it had fully risen. Winters were endless, long, dark, and bitterly cold. Soil was thin, often sour, sometimes soaked with rain or locked beneath frost. Wheat shriveled in such conditions, barley grew unevenly, and oats, though promising, failed when early frosts arrived. Yet rye persisted. Its roots drove deep into poor ground, drawing strength from places where nothing should grow. It bent to the winds, but did not break. Rye became not the chosen crop, but the necessary one. Its endurance mattered more than taste or beauty. Where the earth offered little, rye returned enough. In this quiet transaction of survival, it became the grain that whispered hope across frozen valleys. Unlike wheat, which demanded rich, carefully managed soil, rye thrived in land that others would abandon. It grew in sand, in acidity, in fields that seemed more burden than blessing. It sprouted quickly, claiming the ground before frost could steal it away. Farmers learned to trust it. It resisted diseases and pests that plagued finer crops. Even when snow lingered well into spring, rye bided its time, steady and dependable. In a world where failure meant famine, rye was the shield. It was never extravagant, but always reliable, the safety net that spared families from hunger's reach. To plant rye was to plant certainty, and in the north, certainty was worth more than gold. From this resilience came the bread that defined the region. Rye bread was not light or airy like the loaves of France or Italy. It was heavy, dark, and dense. Its crust was firm, its crumb moist, and its flavour deep with the earth that birthed it. To those who lived in medieval Scandinavia, this bread was not indulgence. It was sustenance shaped to endure. Because it kept fresh longer than wheat bread, it was ideal for the long, unbroken winters. Families baked loaves as thick as a man's arm and stored them for weeks, sometimes months. When paths were buried under snow and homes stood isolated, this bread was assurance. It meant life could continue, even in the silence of midwinter. Rye bread was more than food. It was rhythm. It accompanied births, marriages, funerals, woven into every stage of life. It fed farmers, fishermen, merchants, priests. In its heaviness was both hardship and strength, a mirror of the lives it sustained. South of the Baltic, things looked very different. In England, barley dominated the peasants' tables. In France and Italy, wheat reigned supreme, its white flour reserved for the wealthy. Fertile plains and milder climates allowed for delicacy, abundance, and the bread of refinement. In contrast, the darker loaves of the north seemed foreign, even coarse to southern travellers. But to the Scandinavians, those loaves were identity itself, a testament to survival against odds. This divide was not about preference, it was adaptation, shaped by land and climate. Medieval Europe was a patchwork of responses to its environment, each culture bending to what the soil and sky allowed. Rye was the North's answer, and its endurance was proof that survival mattered as much as splendour. It did not stop at food. Rye seeped into custom and belief. Festivals marked the harvest with the loaves baked from the first cut sheaves, offerings of gratitude to the land. Winter gatherings saw rye bread shared with ale brewed from the same grain, a gesture of solidarity against hunger and cold. Folklore attributed protective powers to it. Some families left a loaf on the table during lean times to keep famine away. Even in monasteries, rye appeared. The daily labour of monks included its cultivation and baking. Bread became not only nourishment but devotion, a reminder that survival itself could be holy. Through such rituals, rye wove itself into the spiritual as well as the physical life of the North. By the late Middle Ages, rye also became an economic engine. It lacked the glamour of spices or wine, but its sturdiness made it a commodity of trust. Unlike wheat, which spoiled quickly, rye could be stored and shipped. It crossed the Baltic in merchant vessels, joining the trade routes of the Hanseatic League. Surplus harvests found their way into bustling markets of Lübeck and Riga, turning the grain of survival into a quiet currency. At a local level, rye shaped obligations. Taxes, rents, and tithes were often calculated in sacks of grain or loaves of bread. Entire systems of authority leaned on its measurement. Peasants sowed it, priests collected it, landlords recorded it. Without it, the framework of rural society would have fractured. Rye was not only eaten, it was counted, weighed, and exchanged. Its value lay not in grandeur, but in the very possibility of endurance. Rye's significance was not only cultural or economic, it was nutritional. Its density carried more fibre than wheat, releasing energy slowly and sustaining labourers through endless hours of work in the forests, fields and seas. For those who battled the cold, a single meal of rye bread carried them longer than any other grain could. Its nutrients, iron, magnesium, B vitamins, quietly fortified bodies against fatigue and illness. While the refined white breads of the south appealed to elegance, rye fed strength. Its coarseness matched the lives of those who relied upon it. Practical, not delicate. Strong, not beautiful. In the harsh world of the north, those qualities mattered most. Though in its time rye symbolised poverty and necessity, the modern world has recast it as heritage and health. Today, nutritionists hail rye bread as a stabiliser of energy and digestion, celebrating the very traits medieval villagers recognised through experience alone. Denmark's rugbrød and Finland's risleiper, dense, sour, enduring, stand as national foods, proudly linked to identity. Across Europe and beyond, dark-seeded loaves have reappeared in bakeries, marketed as wholesome and authentic alternatives to white bread. What once marked survival now signals tradition. What peasants once endured, the modern palate now embraces. But in the Middle Ages, rye was more than food or trade. It was protection. Famine haunted every community. A cold summer, a flood, or disease could strip away wheat and barley in a season. Rye, with its hardiness, often endured. Its ability to store well made it the grain of choice in communal granaries, the insurance against starvation during the dreaded hungry gap, those months between one harvest and the next. In such times, last year's rye loaves could mean the difference between life and death. Communities placed trust in rye not simply as nourishment, but as security. It was the grain that stood when others fell, the safeguard against despair. To have rye in storage was to have hope. To lose it was to invite catastrophe. Its resilience gave it an almost sacred quality, not celebrated in song or legend, but revered in the quiet gratitude of survival. It is telling that rye rarely appears in tales of kings or poems of glory. It was not the grain of courtly banquets, nor the emblem of conquest. Its greatness lay instead in the hands of ordinary people, peasants, farmers, mothers baking dense loaves in stone ovens, children fed through endless winters. Its power was quiet, its triumphs unrecorded, but its presence preserved countless lives. In the great balance of medieval society, wheat might have symbolised status and power, but rye symbolised endurance. Its dark fields spoke not of splendour, but of perseverance. Each harvest was a declaration that life would go on no matter the odds. Even today, as rye regains recognition, this legacy remains. The grain that once represented hardship now carries pride. From artisanal bakeries in Berlin to kitchens in New York, from traditional loaves in Finland to modern health foods, rye's story has come full circle. What was once the bread of necessity is now a bread of choice. But beneath this revival lies the same truth that defined rye in medieval Scandinavia. Greatness does not always wear crowns or shine in marble halls. Sometimes it hides in the soil, in dark loaves passed hand to hand, in the endurance of people who refuse to let hunger win. Rye teaches us that survival itself is a form of greatness. That resilience, though often uncelebrated, is what carries humanity through its hardest winters. It is a reminder that history is not written only by kings and warriors, but also by the quiet persistence of ordinary lives and by the humble grains that kept them alive. The lesson is simple, yet profound. Strength is not always found in glory, but in endurance. The dark bread of rye, dense, unadorned, unassuming, embodied this truth. In every slice was the spirit of a people who endured, and in their endurance, a reminder that the quietest forces can shape history as powerfully as the loudest.